Hello and welcome back to the part 2 of the Advent CAL. Now we've been working on 4mm needles and we've got about 30 rows there, 28 to 30 rows. You judge it, it's about 10 centimetres and this section now should fit comfortably from about around your knuckle area to about your wrist. So that's the sort of distance you're looking for. Okay. So we're now swapping to the 3.25mm needles just for a few rows, and we are going to start working the knit 2 purl 2 rib that will be the cuff. So for those newer knitters, this is where we knit the first 2 stitches, and the key to ribbing successfully is to bring the yarn between these 2 needles. So you don't want to take them over the needle or around the needle, it needs to come through between, and then we work on a purl 2. Back between the needles and do a knit 2 and then bring it through between the needles again and work a purl 2. So this is what we need to do all the way along, making sure that you don't overlap the yarn, bring it through. So it's simply the stitches that you've been working in full rows, and now we're doing it 2 by 2. Now I will just get to the end of the row and then I want to point something out and explain the reasoning behind what I'm doing, because the number of stitches have been chosen for several reasons, and one of the things I really like to have, and this is whether I'm doing a jumper or cardigan or whatever I'm doing, if I've got a knit 2 purl 2 rib, I like to start on, oops, wrong there, I've got a purl. I like to start on a knit 2 and I like to end on a knit 2. That's the problem when you're knitting and counting at the same time. So I've got to knit 2, even though it's only 2 stitches. Purl 2, right, knit 2, success. So here we have, you can see how this is starting to do a little bit of a ripply effect here, and that is what we want. So here at the beginning we've got knit 2, here at the end we've got knit 2. Now when you come to sew up this section, you're going to lose the first and the last stitch, and what will happen then is you'll end up with an almost invisible seam, because that knit stitch there will be next to this knit stitch here. So you'll have your knit 2 purl 2 rib going all the way round, and because those 2 have disappeared, you'll end up with a nice knit 2 and probably won't even see the seam. So that's why we particularly picked to have the knit 2 purl 2 rib and to start with the knit 2 and end with the knit 2. Now that's given me my first row there, so that's row 1. And then, because we've ended on a knit 2, you have to begin the next row with a purl 2. And if you're a newer knitter, think this is the purl side. So when you're looking at the purl side, you start with 2 purl stitches. And when you're looking at the knit side, you will be starting and ending with 2 knit stitches. So that's just a nice little tip for the newer ones. For you more experienced knitters, you would have probably done that automatically. So purl 2, yarn between the needles, knit 2, yarn back between the needles, purl 2, take the yarn other way between the needles, so you keep swapping this backwards and forwards, making sure that you don't loop the yarn over. fairly quickly get to the end of the line. Of course, depending on your speed and skill levels, obviously you can pause the video, you can rewatch it, you know, use this in whatever way you need to make sure that you're getting the right finish. If you're an experienced knitter, you'll probably be fast forwarding this point. So we're definitely on the 3.25mm needles. Don't forget to change both needles, because it's quite easy to get carried away and forget and just briefly end up using a thick and a thin. So that's the final purl 2. Okay, turn it round and don't forget to up your stitch count there, and you can see here we're getting slightly more of the effect that you're looking for. So the stitches stack on top of one another. The purls are over the purls, the knits are over the knits. So I'm now going to work another 2 rows of this. So this might be a point where you want to just skip over this a little bit so that you've got your 4 rows ready, or you may want to just pause me while you catch up with where I am. I think this is a lovely rib. I really like the Knit 2 Purl 2 rib. It's one of my personal favourites because it's got a lovely concertina effect, but it also has quite a bit of stretch to it. So for something like a wrist warmer, where you want it to go over, often over the edge of a jumper, or sometimes over a coat cuff, that's another option, then it has that stretch. But if you do end up with quite a thin jumper like I've got on today, it's not too baggy, it doesn't end up with a baggy edge to it. So that's row 3. See how it's starting to build up quite nicely now. Just to my stitch count, my row count. Surrounded me in chocolate and candy canes and things, and I don't touch any of them because I don't want to get the knitting sticky. It's very tempting. So this is done as row 2, so you started with the purl 2 and we're going to end with the purl 2. Far off now. I do hope you're enjoying making these, and that if you're a beginner it's working for you, because it's really nice when you start to achieve what you're making, and particularly if you can then either show it off for yourself or give it as a gift. So here we go. So that's row 4 on the smaller needles, and you can see how you're getting that slightly more concertina in effect. If I actually put it to where it wants to sit, you've got like a frill, and that's lovely. So I'm now just going to take that off, because we're going to go back now to the 4mm needles. At this point you can choose if you would prefer to stay on the tighter needles. That's up to you. It does depend a little bit on how you're intending to wear these, but I'm going back to the 4mm needles, and again you're just starting exactly the same way, and you shouldn't have any trouble getting the yarn to work, as in moving from thicker and thinner needles, because there's not that big a difference in this. There's really just enough to It does adjust your tension, so tension is one of the things that becomes more important as you get further into your knitting. These are very forgiving on tension because of course a wrist warmer doesn't have to fit perfectly. It is meant to, you know, go over things and not be too snug a fit. But yeah, and if you did want to alter the sizing of these, I would say add or subtract 4 stitches. So if you wanted to make them smaller, take away 4 stitches, and if you wanted to make them bigger, add 4 stitches, or more or less if you wish, because that way it won't affect the ribbing. You can still work this ribbing in exactly the same way as long as you work in sets of 4. So we're now back onto this thicker needle, and make sure you pop the other one away, and at this point make sure you adjust your stitch count, or your row count rather, and pop it onto one of your needles. So you now need to work 26 rows on these fatter needles. So I've done one already, so I have another 25 rows to work using the thicker needles, or slightly more or slightly less. It is your work, so just make sure you record the number of rows that you're doing so that you make the second one the same. And we will carry on and do that bit. I don't think you need to watch me knit another 25 rows. So working your 2x2 rib for another 25 rows, and then we'll see you in the next instalment. Good luck with your knitting.